By the way, before you continue on with this video, there's going to be some slight manga spoilers, so just want that to be known. Alright, let's continue. Selflessness and selfishness. Two incredibly core themes to Jujutsu Kaisen's narrative as a whole. Something so deeply intertwined into the narrative of Jujutsu Kaisen that it's present in almost every single character, such as the major main characters like Yuji, Megumi, and Gojo, as well as all of the main villains like Sukuna, Mahito, and Kenjaku, even present in much more minor characters like Hajime Kashimo, as well as Meimei and Nanami. Selfishness and selflessness is so deeply written into the narrative that it's a theme that everyone can basically see. However, I do believe a lot of people misunderstand what Gege is trying to portray with the theme of selfishness and selflessness in Jujutsu Kaisen. This is because the most common interpretation that I hear of this is the world rewards selfishness, so this is Gege's warning to you to not be too selfless or else it will not end up well for you, especially not in the world of Jujutsu. However, in truth, I only believe that's half right. I only believe that's half of the story, because I do believe there is a second narrative to this entire clash between selflessness and selfishness in Jujutsu Kaisen. And that second theme all can stem back to one word, and that is satisfaction. While the selfish do get immediate returns, do get that immediate satisfaction, such as Mahito when he gave in to his selfishness was able to land a black flash, or Sakuna who lives by desire to only get immediate satisfaction, it is only a temporary form of satisfaction. The selfless people don't get immediate satisfaction, but they get satisfaction in the journey, satisfaction for the people they help. After all, one of the grandest examples I can think of for this entire theme is Meimei and Nanami directly. Meimei is someone who is incredibly morally bankrupt, but she is also able to go to the place that Nanami dreamed of going to, that Nanami dreamed of building his life to. Meimei can go for a casual vacation after abandoning Shibuya and her duties. However, in spite of that, the dream that Nanami had, the dream that Nanami thought would satisfy him, it wasn't enough to satisfy someone like Meimei. Meimei kept wanting more, kept seeking more. The satisfaction she felt was only temporary because she had to move on to the next task, in comparison to Nanami, who abandoned his selfishness, who abandoned his selfish desires, instead went to Shibuya and later on died, but he ended up dying satisfied, knowing he could pass on his will to Yuji Itadori. And that is the true definition of selflessness in my opinion, because I don't believe the definition of selflessness is just how many actions you do for others in spite of yourself. What I believe is selflessness is how many actions you do for others despite wanting other things, despite having other goals in life, but still being willing to help other people out and throw those goals to the side. And while Nanami is an excellent example of this, there is an even more excellent example of selflessness in Jujutsu Kaisen, which is Yuji Itadori, as well as his foil, which is the perfect example of selfishness in Jujutsu Kaisen, which is Sukuna himself. Jujutsu Kaisen is a story about the roads of selfishness and selflessness, and how selflessness is basically a road that is hell. A road filled with constant struggles, but the ability to enjoy life, the ability to gain satisfaction that lasts much longer in the later haul of it because of the people they end up helping as a result of that road. Hell for whoever chooses to take it in comparison to selfishness, which selfishness is a pleasant road filled of pleasant and satisfactory experiences. However, those satisfactions only last for instants, and that is what I believe these two characters represent best. Yuji Itadori is selfless to a fault. I don't think I need to explain that too much to you, but this is the same person who caused everything in Jujutsu Kaisen, reawoken Sakuna, and it became the vessel of Sakuna also he could try and save his friend. And then when he learned he had the opportunity to save even more people, he chose that rather than immediate death with the one finger of Sakuna inside of him. Which is understandable, but then you hear about what his actual goal is, which is to be able to give people satisfactory deaths that he worked so hard to achieve. And while it might not seem like it because people still have goals and things that they couldn't achieve in life, Yuji has given several people satisfactory deaths through his suffering. Through his suffering, he has been able to help them get the satisfactory deaths that they so needed. One example is someone I talked about early on in this video, which is Nanami Kento, because while Nanami might not have seemed like he got a satisfactory death, he most certainly did get one where he could feel satisfied, because he knew there was someone else who would take on his will, someone else who he could pass the torch on who would be fine, who could handle it from here, a passing of the torch moment, which also allowed Nanami to reunite with his best friend and give last words that weren't a curse, but just encouragement encouragement for Yuji Itadori. Or Nobara Kugisaki, who Nobara was able to die and enjoy life. She was able to see the people who mattered to her, with Yuji taking one of those spots, and with Yuji being the last person she saw, she ended up telling him that it wasn't so bad. And while it did cause immediate suffering to Yuji Itadori, it was almost like the Jujutsu world rewarding him for his acts of selflessness up to this point, his actions and why he even lives, because he's still able to achieve his goal even though it might not seem like it. He was able to help both Nobara and Nanami be able to realize that their deaths were satisfactory, especially Nanami, with Nanami passing on his will directly to Yuji. While it wasn't as much with Nobara, it was definitely there with Nobara as well, because Nobara cared a lot about Yuji as well. And while it might seem like Mahito was the one immediately rewarded because of the fact that Mahito could land the Black Flash, he was immediately rewarded only for it to follow with his own death and humiliation. And while Yuji wasn't the one to put the final blow into Mahito, it was still caused directly by Yuji, as well as one of Yuji's own actions coming back to help him in the long run, being Todo himself. And while Todo did force the brotherly bond onto them at first, through the battle against Hanami directly, Yuji and Todo truly grew into brothers like that. The two of them were able to bond through both their battle against Hanami as well as their battle against each other, where they were able to spar and truly get to know each other and truly become combat brothers. Yuji did not have to take that bond after that point. Yuji did not have to continue bonding with Todo, however he did. He ended up bonding with Todo and forming a brotherly bond, which ended up getting rewarded later on to fulfill Todo's desires for a brotherly bond. For a best friend, for someone who could truly understand him, from his type all the way to how the two of them fight near instinctively. Another one of these examples is Higuruma Hiromi, a Culling Games player and lawyer who lost his way. However, thanks to Yuji's selflessness, through the course of a long battle, he was able to bring Higuruma back to the light, make Higuruma turn from a blind judge to that of a lawyer willing to fight people and protect for justice like he always wanted to be. And it was through that selflessness they were even able to get enough points to achieve what they needed to achieve for the Culling Games. It was only through Yuji they were actually able to get the rules they needed, such as point transfer. After a while, they would have likely gotten those points anyways through Hakari's battle with Kashimo, and it would have taken more time, and they wouldn't have had anywhere near as much points as they needed, especially because Reggie would never pass on his points to Megumi in the first place. As well as the fact that Higuruma would not have passed on the points without it being Yuji directly to use those points in order to make that rule. And Yuji now once again is on that road of hell, that road in order to save his friend Megumi Fushiguro from the grasps of Sakuna, that road where he's willing to put himself through any suffering. In his own words, I'll eat anything to kill him, as in to kill Sakuna, but also to save Megumi, with Megumi being the main thing on his mind, Megumi being the main thing he wants to rescue. And while this might seem selfish, I don't truly think it is, because of the level of burden Yuji is willing to put on himself to make sure the mistake that he made that caused so much pain to others gets corrected. Yuji is on a path of pain and suffering in Jujutsu Kaisen, where he repeatedly suffers, repeatedly has to deal with more and more torment and more pain. However, it's repeatedly shown that that pain and that torment ends up paying off for him. It ends up allowing him to get satisfied. It ends up allowing him to help others get satisfied and help others along that path. However, let's move on to talk about Sukuna and how Sukuna represents selfishness and the flaw that is selfishness. Now, like how I don't need to tell you that Yuji Itadori is selfless to a fault, I don't need to tell you that Sukuna is selfish to a fault. When the literal narrator himself ends up saying it, that all Sukuna really cares about is himself and his own ambition. Even Megumi Fushiguro doesn't really count as a person he cares about because he just sees him as a tool that he ends up caring about. However, what is even more prevalent is every single time Sukuna gets satisfied for a little moment by giving in to his selfishness, no matter what it is, it's always followed up by immediate dissatisfaction later on, unless something comes along the path to satisfy him right after. And one such amazing example of this is the battle against Jogo himself. And the reason that I think this is an amazing example of this is something especially the anime does, where the anime directly shows Sukuna looking down on Jogo and his face that just gives so many emotions and so clear what he's actually feeling in that moment, which is the immediate emptiness that came after he defeated him. Because while he did feel satisfaction from the battle, he did clearly enjoy himself because he was repeatedly laughing and just having the time of his life throughout the entire fight. Now that Jogo was gone and Jogo was dead, he was no longer satisfied. He no He no longer had fun, he was bored, and he was feeling empty until Mahoraga came in and filled the spot in order to satisfy him once again. Another character who ended up seeing this emptiness and loneliness in Sukuna was Gojo himself, one of the only few characters that could truly relate to Sukuna but not fully. Just because of the level of strength that Gojo was on, he was able to see that loneliness and emptiness because it was a loneliness and emptiness that he had felt once in the past himself. However, even Gojo couldn't satisfy that loneliness and emptiness, which is what Sakuna overall represents. The curse that is selfishness, because while selfishness offers immediate results, offers immediate amps, and offers the immediate path to what feels like satisfaction, that satisfaction will never last. It will only last for a few moments until it is gone and you need something else to distract yourself, something else to please yourself with, and that is what Sukuna seeks out constantly. It is the way he even lives his life, as he directly describes to Kashimo. As now I'm going to directly read out a line Sukuna himself says: "The thought of needing someone else to fulfill me never crossed my mind. If I want to eat, I eat. If I see an eyesore, I kill it. And if it entertains me, I throw it a bone. I live according to my own stature. If that can't be measured or understood, that's not my problem." However, it's that same lifestyle, that same way that Sakuna lives, that I believe is Sakuna's ultimate curse of selfishness that is on him as a person. Sakuna will never ever be satisfied other than in death itself. Nothing else will satisfy him because nothing else can last for long enough to truly satisfy him and his selfishness other than his own death. All Sukuna could ever hope to get is temporary satisfaction. Temporary satisfaction, at least when it comes to life. The temporary satisfaction of battle. However, that doesn't last forever, as the thrill of battle eventually goes down in you. Or Sukuna gaining more and more power. While one would think that would satisfy you, it only ends up making you feel empty or making you want more power, more challenges, because the thrill of power only lasts for so long. Even eating and drinking is only an immediate satisfaction, not a satisfaction in the long haul. But Sukuna is more than aware of that curse of selfishness on him. It's why he always seeks out ways to entertain himself, ways to please himself, and ways to just give into his instincts. Always trying to find immediate satisfaction, like an addict to satisfaction itself. As a result of that, he constantly delivers torment to others because he believes that will satisfy him, and it does satisfy him only for a little bit. That satisfaction, though, will never last forever, as that is the amazing difference between Sukuna and Yuji and both of the paths they took. Yuji is taking a path of selflessness and having to suffer constantly throughout it, having to constantly get pain and strife and repeatedly get injured and tormented, despite the fact that everything came just from a selfless desire to save his friend and a selfless desire to make sure people could die satisfied and people wouldn't die alone. In comparison to Sukuna himself, who Sukuna seeks out the days and tries to satisfy himself every single day, whether it's through eating, drinking, combat, getting stronger, all of that to try and satisfy him, only for none of it to work. Or rather, it does work, it just doesn't work for long enough. It doesn't satisfy him for long enough. It's a short-term satisfaction that leads to him wanting to get more, wanting to be satisfied by more, and that is the selfish loop. The selfish path of looping, where he repeatedly gives into his selfishness and tries to satisfy himself only for it to last for a little bit, and then trying to satisfy himself to even greater extents, thinking it would work only for it to not work, over and over again until the eventual day comes where he himself dies, in comparison to Yuji, who is on a path of suffering in order to help satisfy others, in order to help bring others to satisfaction, in order to do good for other people, as he takes all the pain he has to get on this journey, and he's going to end up being rewarded by having several things he can look back on and be satisfied about. The narrative of Yuji and Sukuna is quite a simple narrative, the paths of selfishness and selflessness and the results that come of them. But I want to ask you a question now. What seems like the better path? The path of selflessness, where you're going to constantly suffer throughout that path, but you'll be able to help people and slowly gain a satisfaction that will last much longer? Or the path of selfishness, where you're going to constantly seek out things to satisfy you. The selfishness path will be a lot easier, but it will be a lot more short-term, a lot more temporary in comparison to the selfless path, which will be a lot more painful, but a lot more long-term. And that is the question I want to leave with you, the viewer. Because while it's pretty clear Gege most definitely has a preference, I want to know what you think your preference is, what you believe is the better path to walk down upon for you. However, that's what I believe the narrative of Sukuna and Yuji is made to represent. I want to hear what you guys think in the comment section down below. I'll see y'all later. Peace out. Have a good day.